a leaked letter outlining a plot by hardline Muslims to take over schools in the city of Birmingham. The snap inspection of 21 schools in the city.
Any school could now be subject to rigorous on-the-spot inspections.
And 5 schools being placed under special measures.
A culture of fear and intimidation has taken grip since the schools were last inspected.
The British Education Oversight Authority, known as Ofsted, found that conservative Muslim governors had exercised inappropriate influence over school activities at the Old No Academy, a secular primary school where 99% of the school children are Muslims. A June inspection concluded that school governors had been promoting a narrow faith-based ideology. The report said a Christmas party had been cancelled, a tombola was banned for being un-Islamic, and school funds were used to subsidize a trip to Mecca for Muslim pupils. Teachers said they kept quiet for fear of losing their jobs. The school denies charges. It promotes extremism. On its internet site, it said Ofsted had found no evidence of strict Islamic practices in the school, and it rejected claims that any member of staff altered the curriculum in an attempt to deceive inspectors. The row over religious ideology in schools has long been brewing here in Birmingham, a city where more than 1 in 5 was born outside Britain. Around 40% of the population come from a migrant background. Many families have ties to former British colonies like Pakistan and Bangladesh. Here in the inner city area, Small Heath, most residents are Muslim. Many parents want their culture to be reflected by the education system.
I think it's wrong for them to be taught at a young age, to be taught sex education. Instead, they should be taught religious. Or if they're going to teach them sex, why not teach them religious as well?
And what's normal in most British schools poses some Muslims with a dilemma. Mixed gender classes, for example.
Okay, say if you was a boy now, and I had one conversation with you, and then after that conversation, you thought, rah, I like that girl. And then you try to talk to me again and again and again. And then I start getting close and close and start opening up more. And then it can lead to sin. That's why it's hard.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
You feel insecure that he can hurt you?
If I see him, I suddenly, all my body starts shaking.
Britain's Sharia councils are under scrutiny.
Because he loves you also very much.
Yeah, but this is not enough.
They operate across the country, deciding on family matters using Islamic or Sharia law.
We were unhappy. Well, mostly I was unhappy because I wanted to have respect in my life.
Mainly they hear from Muslim women wanting to end their marriages.
They cannot go to civil courts because the marriages are only religious marriage. They come here in order to resolve those problems, issues in the sight of God.
But the government's concerned they may be discriminating against women. It's now investigating whether Sharia law is being misused.
Even from those that are considered quite good, women have come to us with negative stories, and some of these are very vulnerable women, and they should be treated with respect, not treated as second-class citizens.
We've been given rare access to one council to get an insight into how they work, and spoken to the women who use them.
He's my witness. He's standing here. No, he is my witness. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. He's my witness. My witness has been standing here for an hour. What did she see? Tell him. No, what did she see? Who did she walk up to? Who walked up to who? She came up to my face. I'm scared. I'm scared of you. I'm scared of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Freedom of speech. We're not going to take your racism anymore. We're not terrorists and we're not suicide bombers. Throw your television in the dustbin. Throw your television in the dustbin. This is a free country and we can speak freely in public. That woman did what? Did she come up to me or did I go up to her? And she threatened me.
You want to keep the shouting over me or you going to give me a commendation?
He's a witness. You don't want to hear what the witness has got to say. Do you? Go and find some rapists.
If you're not going to listen to me, give me the common courtesy of hearing what I've got to say.
When I've got a witness. When I've got a witness.
Okay, I'll hear what she's got to say.
Well, you don't want to hear what she's got to say.
I will gladly
You think I'm scared, don't you?
Right.
I am scared of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu. Alhamdulillah. Allah Akbar. Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah. You're in my face. You came up to me.
I walked away. You're the one that said.
You're coming up to me now. Come on. Come up to me now. Come on. No. I'm going to listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I'll tell you now.
I'm going to listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Throw your television in the bin. We are not terrorists. We are not suicide bombers.
I'll tell you, this young man has the right to assembly. He can stand here, he can shout, he can alarm, and so on and so forth. He can shock and offend.
Here's my witness.
If his actions go beyond that, and he commits a public order offence,
criminalise me.
then he will be arrested.
Criminalise me.
Yeah, and I'm no one. You have the right to assembly, you can shout, you can shock and offend. If you harass or distress anyone, you will be arrested.
We're racist. Get out of here. Go and find some rapists. Go and find a rapist. Go and find a pedophile and get out of my face. Allah Akbar.
Today I want to tell you why I don't like Muslims. Now, every once in a blue moon, a Muslim turns up at my channel and they start liking my videos and giving me compliments. And this has happened recently with another YouTube vlogger by the name of Kawakabastra. And she has come to my channel recently and started to, give me lots of compliments and say nice things about me, which, if you know anything about me, is the kind of thing that I like to hear. But it seems now that she's worked out that I am Islamophobic. And therefore, it seems to have, brought to an end our friendship, I believe. It seems to have brought this kind of fork in the road where it's not possible to get along anymore. And, this kind of makes me sad because she's a very interesting woman. You can go and check out her YouTube channel, Kawakabastra. She's an Egyptian belly dancer who lives in New York. And like I say, this friendship has been really good for me. But now, sadly, it seems it's probably come to an end. So I want to explain the full story of why I don't like Muslims. Now, to do this, let's begin at the beginning. And back before the days of 9/11, the whole concept of Muslims and Islam was something which we really didn't know anything about. It was not in the Western consciousness before 9/11. We really had no clue about who these people were. And back in the day when I was a kid, some of my best friendships as a child, they were with immigrants. Especially, I can remember I had one excellent friendship with a Pakistani boy. And back in those times, the immigrants were really great people because they were always intelligent, they were always sensitive, they were always marginalized, they were always aspirational, hardworking, they got bullied, they were outsiders. They were outsiders just like I was. And that is why it was very easy to have friendships with them. But if we fast forward, then we had 9/11, and that changed the paradigm. It changed the idea of Muslims in the public consciousness. And then it was after 9/11, I went to university, and I found myself surrounded by non-whites, and especially I found myself surrounded by Muslims. And this is where you have to understand that the group dynamic changes. Because if you are an outsider, and that means the kind of person who, when there is one immigrant in the village, you might befriend them. But if you are an outsider and you're surrounded by a group of non-whites or a group of Muslims, you will still be an outsider even though you're white. So what I'm trying to say is that when I was surrounded by Muslims, they kind of form their own group. And because you are weird, you are then the outsider, right? And there are some people in that group of Muslims, when I think back to university, who I was friends with, right? But there were others who weren't friends with me. But even the ones that I was friends with, it wasn't the same relationship that I had with the only Pakistani in the village. No, it was different, because it was like lots of these Muslims had better social status than I did. So and I was kind of the outsider. So they were being nice to me in order that our friendship functioned. And that's a different situation to me being nice to the only Pakistani in the village. It's a different dynamic. It's the reverse dynamic. And again, there were Muslims in that group who they simply didn't like me. So there were what I'm saying is, when you have a big group of Muslims, suddenly they stop seeming to be intelligent or interesting or aspirational or whatsoever. And instead, they just seem like normal people. They're stupid, they're annoying, they're selfish, they're self-important. They look down on other people. And this is what I'm saying. This is the realism of what happens when you live amongst a larger group of these people. Now, despite all these things, I can still look back and say I had some extras with Muslims. So especially when I lived in London and when I lived in Vienna, there were certain Muslims who I taught, and they were good students, and they were excellent people to work with. And I like these people. But at the same time, I have to say, there's other Muslims who I didn't like. There were people who I met who really annoyed me. And I would say, especially with Muslim women, I would say that they are special snowflakes to the extreme. And it's not, as a Western man, it is not worth having anything to do with these people, in my experience, because they are very, very special. So those are some things. Those were some preliminary things. Now, then what happened? Well, then I woke up to 9/11, right? Then I woke up to 9/11 and realized it was an inside job. And this, in the first instance, I cannot tell you how absolutely sorry I was for the Muslims at that point. I cannot tell you how sorry I was for them. That they should be blamed for this. That they should then have their countries bombed and invaded and destroyed on the back of this, even though they've done absolutely nothing. This is the thing. I cannot tell you how sorry I was for the Muslims at this point. Absolute massive sympathy for them. And again, to see them demonized in the media, which I would say back in the back in the noughties, Muslims were very often demonized in the media, and I didn't like it. Whereas now we've become very politically correct, but I would say in the noughties, Muslims could be, they still were demonized in the media. I mean, they still are demonized in the media, apropos, being terrorists, this kind of thing. But all of these factors made me feel incredibly sorry for Muslims, incredibly sorry for them. So that's the first thing. But then I'm afraid the relationship utterly soured, and here is why. The first thing that happened is that I spoke to several Muslims. In fact, I can think of 4 who I spoke to, and I tried to talk to them about 9/11. And what was the reaction I got? Well, one guy said that I didn't know what I was talking about because I wasn't there on the day. Another woman, she absolutely blanked me. She treated me like shit. I was trying to explain to her about 9/11, and she just, oh my God, she looked at me as if I was mad, and she treated me like absolute garbage. And then there was another woman who said she would ring the police. And this was a respectable woman. This was a respectable, so-called intelligent woman. And she said she threatened to phone the police if I continued to talk to her about 9/11. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to say to people who are, who think we're going to wake up everyone. People who are on the red pill, who think all we have to do is wake up the normies. This is what I'm saying about it not being worth it. It's not worth it because there are blue pill normies out there, supposedly respectable, intelligent people who will lock you up for your red pill views. They will happily see you go into a mental asylum for your red pill views because they think they're dangerous for society. That's what they'll do. And to their dying days, they will think that by doing so, by locking you away, they are doing society a favor. They will actually think that because they're mentally retarded and they're scum. And this goes back to all what I've been saying for a while is that it's not worth it. But the point is that when you feel so sorry for Muslims and when you put your neck on the line, as I have done by going on and on about 9/11 truth, and you get loads of shit for it, and you probably don't do your career prospects any good, and you get put on a blacklist, and then you turn to Muslims and you try and tell them about it, and they treat you like you're scum, like you're some kind of weirdo conspiracy theorist. Oh my God, that's when you realize it's not worth it. I will not be insulted by those people. I will not be insulted by them until my dying day. I will never forgive them because they're garbage. And you don't do that to me, I'm afraid. So that is that. Now, let's move on to another point. Now, I ended up in so many arguments about 9/11 truth with so many people, and especially white people, especially the proletariat. What they think of me as a 9/11 truther is that I'm just some kind of liberal loon who wants to defend Muslims and be anti-establishment. That's what they think. But especially they thought I was a liberal loon and just a Muslim lover, someone who just loves Muslims for the sake of it. And this really annoyed me. And I asked the question, why is it that these white people just cannot conceive of this idea that Muslims did not carry out 9/11? And I came to see there were two key points. The first is that in the eyes of normal white people, they believe that Muslims are like the favored child of our governments because they look at Muslims being favored on halal meat and the burqa and mosque and immigration, and they think that our governments love Muslims. And therefore, the idea that they would play this dirty trick on Muslims is just impossible for them to grasp. They think that our governments would never do anything bad to the Muslims. So that's one thing. But in the second instance, normal white people are so pissed off with Muslims wearing their burqas, coming here with their halal meat and all this garbage. They're so pissed off with them that in fact they don't even have any sympathy with them. That's why they don't care about the wars in the Middle East. So I realized this and I worked it out. And I realized that the best way forward in order to bring about the truth of 9/11 and in order to end these horrific wars in the Middle East would be if Muslims, would just take it easy on things like halal meat, on things like the burqas, and things like having faith schools in your own mosque. If Muslims were to let these things go and not be concerned about them and not make a fuss about them, that might then convince the general white population that the wars in the Middle East are wrong, that 9/11 was an inside job. And so I said to Muslims, you know what? Maybe you should think about your behavior. Because if you come to somebody's house and you behave like a spoiled child by demanding halal meat and faith schools and burqas and mosques, the people who own that house are not going to like you and are not going to look favorably upon you. And so I said all of this to Muslims. But of course, you cannot say anything to Muslims without them taking offense. And that's what they did. And this is, again, it's another reason why I really cannot stand them, because they will not take any criticism. They will not understand that issues like halal meat and the burqa and all these unnecessary, silly little ideas which are associated with their religion are not as important as people dying in wars in the Middle East. They will never be able to grasp this concept. And that's why you cannot tell these people, because they're children, they're special snowflakes, and they're not here to integrate. They're here to have their stupid bloody cult. So there again, it's another reason why I got even more angry with Muslims. And now let me give you another reason. It was at that point, you see, still in this, with all of this, this stuff which was going on, I still hadn't realized that there was a program of immigration of Muslims into the UK. I didn't realize it was a full-scale program. I thought it was just like a little bit of it was happening. And that maybe, you know, if Muslims were being talked up in the UK, it was just kind of as a disguise for 9/11 and the wars in the Middle East. But it was now that I realized that this is not true. There is a program to bring them in here in large numbers and to let them not take over the country, but to be a massive and important minority. At the very least, we don't know the extent to which they will be allowed to grow, but there is a program of bringing them in here. And once I realized this really infuriated me. And you get to see them. In the streets of my, if you go to the town where I live, oh my God, they're everywhere. And they're not here to integrate. They're wearing their stupid burqas, their stupid Halloween costumes, these man sacks that they've got. And they have no feeling, no desire to integrate. And they're everywhere. And they're absolutely annoying because they don't give a shit about issues like 9/11 or the wars in the Middle East. They only care about the preservation of their stupid cult religion. That's all they want. They want the right to wear their Halloween costumes, their medieval burqas. They want the right because it's part of their cult. They want the right not to be offended. They're the most arrogant people in the world. I will tell you now, I had a Chinese friend as a kid, and in the village where we lived, there was, there were some white thugs. And on one occasion, one of these white thugs, they knocked on the door of his takeaway shop at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, this thug was knocking on the door and he wanted something to eat. But actually, by that time, the shop was closed. But he was still knocked on the door. So what did the Chinese people do? Well, they opened up the door and they gave him what he was asking for. He didn't have the money to pay for it, so they gave him it for free. Why, and probably the Chinese were upset by this. They were dissatisfied. But why did they do it? They did it because they're submissive, and they realize that that's what you're going to have to do in a foreign country. They realize that it's better to come to England and earn money rather than starve in China and have no opportunities. So they came here and they have to accept that certain things like that are going to happen. But they make enough money and eventually they move off to a better neighborhood and their kids get better jobs. They're submissive. They're submissive. They accept that shit will happen. But Muslims will not do this. Muslims come here and they bring their Halloween costumes with them. And they're not here to integrate. They're not here to integrate. They're not here to be submissive. And they will not accept any bad mouthing of their religion. Anything at all. Everything to their ears is Islamophobic. But here's the thing, because it doesn't even end there. Because now I've kind of worked out where all of this is heading. The Muslims are going to be brought in here. They're steadily going to be increased. Their position. There will be more Muslims in the medio-political establishment day by day, year on year. In 10 years' time, the media, media and politics could be absolutely dominated by Muslims. And what's going to happen then is that eventually people will say, you know what, these wars that we had in the Middle East were illegal. And then eventually someone will say, and you know what? 9/11 and 7/7 were inside jobs. And to some extent, I'm pleased that these things will actually come out because I wanted them to come out for so long. And back in the day, I felt so sorry for Muslims on this score. But the problem now I see is that when these things come out, they will just be used as a tool to completely destroy Britain. They will be the final nail in the coffin. They will be the absolute nail in the coffin. And the Muslims, who at this point in history don't seem to give a shit about these things because they're too busy worried about halal meat and burqas, when that time comes, they will use these things like 9/11 and 7/7 to overthrow the British government. They will get rid of it. They will demolish it. And we'll just be absorbed into Europe. This is what will happen. And as much as I'm glad these things will eventually come out, I'm so annoyed. I'm so annoyed because they're going to be used to completely cuckify the British nation. The nation of Britain will be destroyed. And these people, they're going to have the last laugh. That's what I'm saying. And like I said, I'm glad that 9/11 truth and this kind of thing will come out. I'm glad. But on the other hand, the Muslims will get the final laugh, and they will be laughing at everyone. They will be chasing James Corbett into a hole and calling him a terrorist for being white. That's what I anticipate. Because when the worm turns like that, I just anticipate that's what they're going to be like. And so for all these reasons, I cannot tell you how, angry I am at these people. I really am. I'm sorry it should be like that. So let me just come on to a few final points. Now, this lady who I really like, and I'm so sorry that our friendship must be soured like this, but she said that, she would be scared to come, if this is the attitude of people in Britain, of being Islamophobic, she would be scared to come to Britain wearing her hijab. Well, and this just really annoys me, right? Because why would anyone in this climate think that it's okay to come to London in a hijab? Of course you should be scared. You should be absolutely scared, because there's two things which are going on here. First of all, we've had 9/11. And then in London, we had 7/7. And people who are on the blue pill, which is the majority of the population, think that these things were carried out by Muslims. And incidentally, this woman who said she was scared to come to London, on another one of her videos, she specifically stated, don't worry about the 9/11 conspiracies. Okay, well, let's not worry about them. Let's not worry about 9/11 conspiracies. So 9/11 was carried out by Muslims. So why is it that Muslims can't realize that if you come to places like London and you're wearing a hijab, why is it so impossible for people to realize that that might scare the living daylights out of British people, out of Western people? Why is this thing so difficult to understand? It's completely natural in the human psyche that if you're dressing up in the clothes of Islam, if you're wearing a burqa, or you're wearing traditional Arabic regalia, or you're just wearing a hijab, you're associated with terrorism. I'm sorry that it should be like that, but that's how humans think. That is not an irrational idea, because the consequences of not recognizing this fact are horrific. They are the horrific consequences that we saw on 9/11 and 7/7. And nobody wants to end up like that. So if you are on a tube on the underground and you see someone opposite you wearing a burqa, you should be bloody scared. Anyone with common sense would be scared. And I'm sorry, but the same goes for the hijab. It is all part of the same thing. Now, another thing, there is also a culture war going on, right? So now the average British person, if they see someone in a hijab, they're going to be angry. They're going to be angry because they know that these people are coming into their country and are taking over. London is not even a white city anymore. There is only a 45% population of whites in London. And the natural inhabitants of London have been displaced. They've been displaced by a lot of people who wear burqas. If you go to London now, you will see women in medieval burqas. So people are angry. It is a natural reaction that people will be angry when they see women wearing hijabs. So I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that we can't go back to the nice times, because back in the day, I would have been the quintessential English gentleman. And I would have taken a foreign guest and showed them around the city, and I would have been absolutely nice and pleasant and the typical English gentleman. That's what I would have been. But those days are long gone now. Because one, we have terrorism, which scares the fucking willies out of people. And then in the second place, we have this cultural invasion where normal white people are being displaced by people in burqas, and they can't say anything about it, because if they do, they're called Islamophobic. So people are angry. And I'm sorry that I really, let me give you an example. If I go to Iraq, why can't I go to Iraq wear a big Union Jack t-shirt and sing "Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the world," and then get completely drunk and have sex on a beach. Why can't I do that? Where are my rights? Are all those Iraqis, are they Britishophobic? Why would they hate me if I did that? Why would they hate me? I've got rights. I've got rights. They shouldn't be Britishophobic like that. Well, guess what? I don't have rights to do that. I have to use my common sense and think about, provoking people. I can't, if I go to Baltimore, I can't wear a Ku Klux Klan outfit. Well, but I'm not in the Ku Klux Klan. I don't approve of what they do. I'm not racist against black people. I just like the costume. I just like the Ku Klux Klan costume. I think it's a nice one. And there's no laws. There's no laws in America saying you can't wear a Ku Klux Klan outfit. There's no laws. It's freedom of expression. It's liberty, it's freedom, it's all those things that America represents. I should be able to wear a Ku Klux Klan outfit in Baltimore. Are the people in Baltimore, are they Ku Klux Klanophobic? Why can't I do that? See, and people that cannot think anymore. If you're wearing a hijab in London, you should feel fear. Why would you not feel fear? I'm completely confused. And we might as well mention here that there are people in London who are also of the Muslim faith who will not approve of what you do, which is to be a belly dancer, right? I can tell you now, there are Muslims in London who would happily punish you for what you do. And you have to think about this. And these people are gaining more and more traction. There are parts of London where Sharia law is in place, and it could very easily, there could be more and more and more Sharia law in this country. Why? Because if anyone speaks out about it, they'll be called Islamophobic. We also have the Extremism Act in this country. So in theory, if you oppose something like Sharia law, you could be called an extremist and locked up in prison for it. This is the thing. So these kind of things can happen, and this is why British people are pissed off. This is why if they see a woman in a hijab, they're not going to think, oh, that's wonderful. They're going to get angry. And this lady, she said that I was giving into hate and that I'm playing into the paradigm, and she's actually right on this. This is what we do by combating Islam and getting all worked up about it and angry about it. We are playing into the hands of the elites. We're contributing to this, conflict, this war of civilizations. I agree. But what do you want us to do? Because we can't, if we don't react to these things, if we just accept it all and let ourselves be culturally invaded and let everything be described as Islamophobic and have our freedoms taken away because they can be considered to be insulting on some level to an alien religion. If we don't react to that, then what are we? We have to react to that. And I just, it's exactly the same thing with Black Lives Matter. If you don't react, you're just a cuck. The problem is that in these things, there's only two positions you can take up. You can either be a completely liberal cuck who just takes it up the ass, or if you have an ounce of self-respect, you then have to be the polar opposite, which is Islamophobic or racist. And I'm afraid to say that normal people will have to choose the second option because they have self-respect. It doesn't matter. I can come on here and I can say that I used to be interested in Muslim culture. Back in the days before 9/11, I read books about the Arabic culture. I even actually tried to learn Arabic at one time. I completely failed, but I tried. I was interested in it. It's pointless me coming on here saying I've had lots of Muslim friends. It's pointless me coming on here saying I've stood up, I've ruined my career over 9/11, or I've stood up consistently for Muslims in the wars in the Middle East. It's pointless me saying all that because as soon as you go against them, as soon as you just say one thing negative, like I don't like burqas or I don't think halal meat is a good thing, as soon as you say one thing negative, you are Islamophobic, you are right-wing extremist, you're a neo-Nazi, and they put you over to that other level. And this is why it's so annoying. I would love not to hate anyone. I would love to be in that situation. I remember seeing there's a 9/11 documentary called The Elephant in the Room, and it's by a British guy, I think, and he went to New York and interviewed people about 9/11, and on one occasion he spoke to a Muslim in the underground. And this Muslim, what he did was every night he went out and he helped the city's homeless. And the interviewer said to this Muslim, he said, "What do you think about the idea that 9/11 was an inside job?" And this Muslim, who was a wise man, he basically said, "So what if it is? What are you going to do?" And his seeming philosophy was, you cannot change things like this. You cannot change things, and the best thing to do is just to go out into the world and help people and do good deeds. And in some ways, I wish I was on that level. I actually wish, there is a part of me which wishes that I could go and welcome the immigrants and help them integrate into life. I wish I could see things in that term. I wish I could just do that good deed. Because on a micro level, lots of the immigrants who are coming here are desperate people who might need help. And I wish I could do that. But the problem is that I can see the macro level as well. I can see the 3D level, and that is important to me. And I can't let that go, because I'm the kind of person who I can't ever work within the system if I think the system is fucked. I always work at the 3D level. I understand the whole system, and if I think the system needs changing, then I think the system will need changing. And this is why you're getting all this hatred. This is why I get so bitter and twisted. This is why I'm full of hatred toward Muslims, because there will always be some Muslim crying about nothing. And if you don't stand up to them, the country is just going to go to pot. But I wish I could give up the hate. I wish I could go and welcome the immigrants and realize that these are needy people and just do a good deed. I would feel good for that. But the problem is that it's going to lead to the ruination of our country. That's the problem. And if you understand things on the 3D level, you will see that this is bad news. It's bad news for everyone. It's not just bad news for the British people. It will be bad news for the immigrants, because they will get destroyed. Their culture will get destroyed. They could get killed, murdered, etc. along the way. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're bringing about a terrible clash of civilizations. And to give you one final metaphor, I feel like a white lawyer who realizes that a black guy hasn't done a crime which he is alleged to have done. And, on the back of realizing that, he then goes out to defend this black guy and thinks, this is terrible. The system hasn't worked for the black guy. It's disgusting. I'm going to stand up for him. The problem is the first day he arrives in court, the black guy doesn't turn up. And he rings the black guy, and the black guy says, "Well, I'm still in bed, boss. I'm not gonna be able to get to court today." And then the next day, the lawyer expects that the black guy will turn up for his court proceedings, and he doesn't. And this time, it's because he's playing computer games. And at this point, the white lawyer kind of realizes that this black guy, he doesn't deserve the sympathy that he's been given. He is an idiot. And after the court proceedings are over, he goes for a drink with the lawyers who were prosecuting this black guy, they knew that this black guy wasn't guilty, but they're lawyers, they're getting paid to do what they do. And the point is that this white guy who was willing to defend the black guy, he realizes that as much as the black guy was innocent, he's got much more in common with the lawyers of the prosecution, who are in some ways liars. And that is how I feel about the whole Muslim issue, especially with 9/11. It's exactly how I feel. I so wanted to defend the Muslims on 9/11, but at the end of the day, they are not my kindred, and they don't think like me. And in some ways, I've got more in common with the people who were prosecuting the Muslims, shall we say.